welcome everybody to Beyond the Crisis, where our aim is to explore through a series of conversations what the future holds when we return to quote unquote normal, whatever that ends up looking like. And more importantly, how we can use this crisis to accelerate the progress we're trying to make in our life, with our work, and with our money as well. My guest today is Eugenie George. She is a certified financial educator. She has an MBA in finance from South University, and she's the author of a new book called Our Money Stories. In her book, she explores how our personal history, ancestry, and our environment plays a role in our money habits today. So I'm interested to talk with her because I think her way of looking at money, while it's written specifically for women of color, I think this understanding of our history can benefit anybody. And I'm also interested in exploring with her how our industry can do a better job of serving those currently underserved by our profession. So welcome, Eugenie.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, glad you're here.
Yeah.
Happy Juneteenth. We're recording this on June 19th as well.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
Well, I thought an interesting place to start, given that your book is Our Money Stories. Tell us a little bit about your story. How'd you get interested in finance and how'd you come to write this book?
Yeah. Well, the short version was I started a business and the business flopped. And I ran out of money, and I used to actually be the person who saved money and had retirement. And when I lost that money, I kind of lost myself. So I started to backtrack and I figured out, okay, well, why were there some gaps with me and money? Because at first I seemed like I was really put together, but then when I lost the money for the business, I kind of just fell apart. And what I actually did was I purchased a journal and I called it a money journal. And I started writing different things like my past, what are some habits that I have. And two of the things that kind of stuck to me or stood out to me was one, when I was younger, I enjoyed math a lot. And then also like I was the kid that would always like sell something, or when I was 8 years old, I said, I want to learn how to golf because that's where the business deals were made. So, and my family always tells me about that. So that was like, there were some very key moments that I recognized that, oh, maybe I should be in finances. The other thing was when I was I used to be an educator, it's really hard to see yourself doing something else or switching careers. And I realized through writing in these journals, oh, you know what? I think I do actually enjoy math. I think I do actually enjoy money. Why don't I just try starting to take CFP classes? Why don't I just try taking classes to get my MBA? So it was kind of like a culmination. But yeah, that was like the big thing. And I had to heal the part of me that said, or that little girl that said, you're not good at math. I had to kind of understand that. So yeah, that's the short story of it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. So I can see how the journals would be helpful. I can see how, realizing that this is something that I enjoy and that I want to do. So sort of that knowledge of I want to pursue this is kind of the first step, but I'm curious, how did you go beyond that? So how did you go from that point to, a lot of people might realize it and still not take the action, right? So how did you get yourself to a place of actually moving in the direction that you knew you wanted to go?
Well, some, they say you're failing forward. So that's always one of the options, right? But then the other thing is, I think what it's called is a multi-potentialite or something like that, where when you get interested in one thing, you find all the information that you can for that thing. So I would create these maps and I would just draw out, okay, well, what would it look like? Because at first I was thinking about going into tech. So I would sit down with one of my closest friends and we would say, okay, well, what would this look like? Well, maybe we should build a robot, or maybe we should do C++. Maybe we should learn JavaScript. So I would sit out and kind of read and find blogs or whatever that I could to get really specific in understanding something, right? And, that's like 6 months, but I do know that that's kind of how I roll when I'm interested in something. For the CFP stuff, it was a lot of research. While I was doing that, I paid off my undergraduate student loans because that was like something that was really important to me. And I would see, okay, well, what's the difference between a money coach and an accountant? Because at first I got a money coach, and money coaches are not certified. They don't have, they're really there to help you with your business. But what I realized even when I had the money coaches, we're from different cultures, and the things that she was selling, she could sell them, and I could not talk like that. Right. There is one of those things where you have to sound different based on how you look. And so that was kind of, kind of a hard thing to really grapple with, but that was the learning piece. So yeah, it was really drawing dots. And then when I did the same thing for writing the book, it was drawing these dots and trying to make sure that, one, I read 50 money books and their table of contents. And I was just like, well, what's missing? Okay, this is missing, this is missing, this is missing, this is missing. There's so many blind spots. And then I just started talking to friends about it.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? What do you
Yeah.
think about this? So yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
totally. So you mentioned blind spots,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you mentioned in the book that kind of the old method of building wealth doesn't work for women of color. So help us understand some of those blind spots. What did you see when you went through all those books and the table of contents and all that? Like, what is missing? What doesn't work for the old method?
Right. Well, I would say that just overall, the idea of crafting a 200-page financial plan just right now doesn't really make sense because we change so much. So particularly when I interviewed a lot of women of color, I recognized that the way I had to phrase it or financial planning, or even like the lifestyle, was to not make them feel bad about themselves for not saving or for not investing. And so that was kind of where I would start from. Even when I would interview them, I would ask them to tell me about their money story. And eventually we got super vulnerable, but that was kind of like the overall thing is, it doesn't matter if I talk to anyone, I'm not going to shame them or tell them what they need to do, because I don't know. First of all, I'm not a CFP yet, so I'm not going to do that. Second of all, I have to assume that I don't understand anything. And the third thing was, understanding someone's history was actually easier for me to understand what would be their potential pitfalls,
Yeah.
right? So for instance, one of the ladies that I interviewed was Japanese American, and she was always talking about how she was a really great saver, how she doesn't understand how her other friends in New York, they're not doing so well. Like, she just didn't get it. She's like, how could people not save, right? But then we actually found out that she didn't take care of herself personally. So she wouldn't purchase glasses, things that are actually really important and essential things for your overall health. She wasn't focusing on. So that's actually something that's really important. And then when we really broke it down, we realized that she was grappling with, I don't want to say scarcity mindset, but she was grappling with, I have to have this cash cushion to be okay, because my great grandmother was in the Japanese internment camps and they lost everything. And it really doesn't matter. Like, I can sit with someone, it doesn't matter what they look like. And if they break down kind of what's going on with their family's history, you can kind of see, oh, okay, so what you're saying is you're afraid that you'll never have enough, so you're always trying to hoard money, or you'll never fully invest in certain things because you're scared, because your parents said do not invest in like REITs or like for certain 401ks, or like get a pension. I mean, that's not really a thing anymore, but you know what I mean? But like, get this one thing. So
Right.
I thought that that was quite interesting. And then through that is like through the financial plan, which we'll probably talk about soon. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I know you did a bunch of interviews for this book, 30 or 40 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm wondering, how easy is it to sort of unpack what somebody's story is and how that's driving their habits today? Do you have a methodology? Is it just a conversation that you have? And, what would you recommend advisors do? Or if somebody wants to sit down with their spouse, maybe they haven't explored this together about, maybe they view money differently. Somebody is, an extreme saver and somebody's an extreme spender, maybe, right? And that's part of
Right.
their personal history, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah, how do you I guess, recommend, or how do you go about exploring somebody's personal histories with money?
Yeah. Well, for those interviews, in particular, I had to be honest and open with them first. So if someone is an advisor, probably the best thing would be to find out your why. So why are you doing this? Why did you even get into this program? Or why did you even decide to be a CPA? Why? There's always
Right.
something. And then you can also find that piece of vulnerability, right? There are a lot of folks that I've spoken to said, I grew up my family grew up in the Great Depression. So I said, I have to be in finance because that's going to help my family. Right.
Right.
So really be honest in your bio, not the same bios that is like, Jeff went to college here and she did this. People think, yeah, that's great. You're smart. But me saying like, hey, I have all the accolades, right? And I still was struggling, right? One, because I just didn't ask for help because that's my ancestry. You figure it out and you do it on your own and you don't ask for else and you don't trust anybody. So I think that's the first thing. But yeah, it was a lot about being vulnerable to them first. And all of their names are anonymous. So it was very clear when I talked to them, I said, we'll record it and I'll write it, but I'm not putting your name in because you can tell me however you feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that was the difference.
Okay. And probably feeling safe in the conversation and being vulnerable are probably the two things there. So even if you're having a conversation with your spouse, maybe go first and tell them, your
Right.
vulnerabilities and stuff before exploring theirs. And so
Yeah. And
that's good. Yeah.
that's a great one too. When I first did it with my fiance, when we like started having money dates, the first date was very like structured and rigid, and it sounded great, but that wasn't the thing. When we started figuring out, oh, okay, based off of your family's history, so his family's they're Irish American, and their family dealt with like the potato famine, and so we
Right.
kind of like unpacked that. So when we have money dates, it's like really relaxed because he'll stress out about it, and for me, I'm always like, yeah, let's learn about it, but you have to meet people where they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's good.
Hmm.
So once we've done a little bit of work unpacking our money story, I know that you have your 8 pillars of financial wellness. Sort of moving on to the next step. Can you tell us a little bit about what those are and what that looks like?
Yeah. So the thing that I wanted to do differently is with personal finance, the overall thing is invest, pay down debt, and save. And those are the three things that most people learn about. And I'm pretty sure, Isaac, when people come to you, they go, I want to buy a house, or I'm ready to get married, or I'm ready to do this. So what I did was, okay, what's the things that are keeping them up at night? It's not really the wedding, right? It's the idea of, are we going to have a good relationship? My parents were divorced. I'm scared that we're going to go into like, it's going to happen to me too. I didn't even
Right.
get a prenup. Like, you know what I mean? So I wanted to know that. So, that's actually pretty hard to talk to people about. So what I did was I looked at financial wellness, which right now is a completely blanket term, right? So the idea of financial wellness means that one could have financial stability. So then I said, well, that's not fully a thing, right? Um, Anybody can achieve stability, but what are all the actual things that connect you? So actually, ironically, while I was writing this book, I also worked for this company called Asset Map, which is a fintech company. And one of the things that they do is they will take one person and they'll break up, they'll create a map, and each of the maps they'll say, oh, are you connected to your aunt? Oh, are you connected to your sister? Oh, do you have a life insurance policy with your great grandmother? And so that's when I was like, oh, well, we should do that with financial wellness, right? We should kind of create this map, or an actual holistic view. So I took the pillars of wellness, which sometimes I get them all right, but there's 8 pillars of wellness, which is, some of it is like intellectual wellness, spirituality wellness, financial wellness, and just kind of looked at all 8 of those. And I said, how do each of these pieces connect to your overall money story, the things that you're telling yourself, right? You can be really great with being nutrition, or like you can be a great healthy person where you take care of your body and you're really healthy, but then at work you overwork and you don't get enough sleep, and that's actually going to affect your money, right? If you're not getting enough sleep, you're not as productive, you're not as happy. So we really have to look at all 8. And I always say, check in, quarterly or monthly. You don't have to do it all the time, but kind of check in where all of the other aspects of your life make sense, and kind of say, well, here's one positive thing in my financial wellness, and here's one area that needs to improve. So don't make it super stressful, but kind of look at where you are with your wellness. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it's kind of like the put your own oxygen mask on first, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're working at a job and you're trying to become financially stable through that income there, but you're not taking care of yourself, and you're getting burned down and run out, and you can't move up in your career, and that's obviously not long-term beneficial to your finances. So make sure your entire house is in order. I like that. You mentioned something in there about not trying to do too much and not stress yourself out. Don't take on everything at once. 2020 has been a bit of a stressful year, I would say, for everybody, for a lot of different reasons. Do you have any thoughts on, okay, so you have this financial wellness plan, you've come up with a plan, I want to make progress in this area and maybe one other area. How do you stay on track through a crisis? What are some of the ways that you would recommend we can stay on track and keep moving in the direction we know we want to go?
Yeah, there's 2 things. One, I would say one is kind of unorthodox, right? I've been reading the Grief Recovery Handbook, and basically that book is what to do when someone has passed, there you have a divorce, a loss of faith, a job loss. So to me, right now, where we're at is, oh, whatever our job we thought was is shifting. So we kind of have to grieve over the fact that we're not at this 9 to 5 every day in the office. What does community look like? We kind of have to grieve over that, which is pretty unorthodox, I would say. But I think in order for you to figure out what the next steps are, you kind of have to think, okay, well, this is new. This is like something entirely new, right? I wrote this book and now I'm an author. That's a new job. That's a new job. And now I'm a writer, right? Before I was a financial wellness specialist, and I would go into corporations and talk about money. But now I'm doing something completely different. So you kind of have to shed some of that. In terms of how to connect with yourself, I still struggle with this right now because of what's happening. But I think I say schedule a time once a week to check in with where you're at. It could be that you're going to have a money date and you're going to actually look at your finances and see where you're at. Or then, and the next week could be, okay, well, maybe we need to sell the house and rent. And like, what is that going to look like? How can we envision a different future? So I think just setting time every week to check in with yourself is probably the best way. But again, like, not stress yourself out, because things happen so much and they change so fast. So you can't make these crazy plans. You know, I was supposed to get married, what, next year? I didn't even know if the place is going to be open. You know what I mean? So even that conversation is not really a thing. So you kind of have to just play it day by day and give yourself room to be uncomfortable. Because right now, a lot of stuff's very uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So it's, you have the freedom to realize that life changes, but at the same time, have some frequency to check in to make sure you're still adjusting and making progress where you want to make progress. That makes a lot of sense. One thing you touched on in there, and maybe shifting gears a little bit to kind of our industry, how we can do a better job of helping people that are basically underserved historically by our industry. And so one of the areas that I know you have experience in is corporate financial education. And I know a lot more companies are starting to offer some sort of financial wellness type benefit. If you look at the data, it's around maybe 1/3 of companies offer something in this area. Do you see that as a potential solution to help more people, to reach more people, to help maybe even move the dial in terms of some of the wealth inequality that's out there right now?
I would say yes. I actually just got off the phone with my old financial BFF, and he now is doing financial wellness for benefits. He's like helping people navigate benefits, right?
Yeah.
So depending on the company, I would say yes, this is going to be a great thing. I think where we're at though is still very baseline when it comes to education or financial education. I don't know if you remember, a while ago, there used to be Alexis von Tobel had that company where she did like financial plans for everybody or whatnot. And it kind of just like, what was it called? LearnVest.
Yeah.
Right. I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about that, but that model could potentially work for financial coaching, right? Not necessarily financial planning, but it definitely could match for financial coaching, right? I think if we start with that, that might be the best way. But I think the other thing is we don't recognize that D&I, or diversity and inclusion, and financial wellness go hand in hand, because there's all these crazy pay gaps, because people don't recognize how to ask for what they're worth, because people don't feel like they're being promoted. That is going to affect how they feel at work. So I think what we really should be talking about is financial insecurity. But we're not talking about that normally. We're just talking about budgeting and making people feel okay about where they're at. But I truly think it's the financial insecurity. We know that 70% of employees are stressed out about money on a day-to-day basis. So if you're stressing out about money, you're losing productivity at work. So I think we really need to rephrase that. And I don't think the metrics that we use for workshops and different things actually will have long-term effects. So I think those are kind of like the big pieces. Most workshops that I was teaching when I was working at On the Goga, it was, here's your money mindset, what is budgeting, core values, and those are really important. But there does need to be some overall thing where you're working with the person that's handling your 401k. You're working with the person that's like a nutritionist, right? The health part. There needs to be like a different type of framework.
Yeah, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, yeah.
And kind of brings it back to the 8 pillars, right? All these
Right,
things matter, and that,
right.
maybe education is not enough. You need somebody there that can hold your hand and help you when you need the help as well. And
Yeah. And I think just to piggyback on that, I think one of the things I've been grappling with too is even that term, the racial wealth gap, is a term that I've been really thinking. I don't think we should really use that term anymore, because a gap is acknowledging that it could be filled, right? We see that there's a pay gap for women, right? That would mean that there was an equal level playing field, that everybody had the same equal opportunities to move up. I don't think we should even say that. I should think we should really think about phrasing it as just economic inequity, or even financial inequity when we're talking about coaching. Because what most people do when they hear that racial wealth gap or the women's wealth gap, they freeze up and then they shut down. So they stop listening to what anybody has to say. And I think that's something really important to note.
yeah, that's a good point. And it kind of brings us back to our industry. I'm sure you know these numbers, but less than, I think, 1 in 5 CFP professionals are women. About 1 in 10 are minorities. How does our industry, from your perspective, do a better job of getting people that are interested in working in this industry, but are in one of these groups that are vastly underrepresented?
I honestly, I don't know. And I have to say that because I just gave a talk with FBA Activate. And I think where we're at right now is, imagine if like somebody just got a divorce, right? And their child just recognized, like, wait a minute, mom and dad, or like mom and mom, or dad and dad, they weren't happy. Like, what? I didn't even know that. And so I think right now, what you're seeing in the personal finance community and the wealth management community is that everybody is just amazed at all the stuff that's happened. Like, I can't believe we didn't pay attention to this. I feel guilty about this. And then, particularly if you're a person of color, folks of color, um, you had so many traumatic experiences, but you weren't even able to talk to anyone about them. Every person that I've talked to that was a financial planner and I told them about my book, they immediately told me a laundry list of stuff that I have to be aware of. And so I feel very fortunate that folks have always been open with me with that. But I also recognize that um, the idea of social justice, or the idea of equality, is going to be, the conversation is going to take a while, because even the term allyship, or what community looks like, or what inclusivity looks like within the financial field, I think everyone has to kind of define it for themselves. So it seems to be really tricky. For my MBA capstone, though, I did create a diversity business plan, which I'll make sure I give that to you. But basically, I interviewed 10 white advisors, and I said, okay, well, you guys are actually doing inclusive work. Like, what are you doing? And some folks said, well, I work for HBCUs. Oh, I actually go and help out for homeless folks that are represent the LGBTQ community. And I said, well, where in your website do you say that? Or where are you putting this? Or where are you, when are you talking to anyone about this? You can't live in a silo about it. And so then we created like a diversity business plan. And in that business plan, it specifically says, let's look at an objective. Let's focus on one thing that you're passionate about in terms of inclusive education. Let's write and specifically state what you're going to do quarterly, and then check back up, because there's a lot of firms that it's just 1 or 2 people. So that's like a brain drain in itself. And I think the big thing too with the initiative is to recognize that you don't have all the answers. So even in the initiative, if you're going to do HBCU, which is a historically Black college, you say, hi, my name is Tim, I'm a CFA, and I don't understand. I don't know everything. I can't fully help folks, but I do teach financial wealth workshops to all HBCU students quarterly. And I go and talk to podcasts for folks that are in HBCUs. And this is kind of my what I do. And just kind of to start from there, because once other people start talking about it, then more people are easy to have the conversation. But right now there's just no conversation. It's like a DNI conversation that people have just created a metric that's not transformational, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I like that. I mean, it's like, make it more visible, get some traction, and then, be humble, admit you don't know everything, which is like, it's just good advice for life, all that anyway. So that's good. Yeah, it's good. Well, I really appreciate you talking about your book and sharing all this with us. I got one final question for you, kind of the closing question, which is, the series is Beyond the Crisis. So when things get back to normal, again, whatever that ends up looking like, what are you most excited to get back to from your prior life? Or what did you realize as you went through this period in 2020 that you can completely cut out that you didn't need?
I think this is going to sound weird, but I have read less since I've been in the during this time. So I'd actually like to read outside. I don't know why I have not been, but I haven't. One thing that I actually am really excited about is my bonus daughter. She just learned how to roller skate. And I am a huge roller skater. Like, I enjoy roller skating. So it will be really fun to go to an actual skating rink, because prior to that, she was terrified of getting on the ramp, and now she's like doing all these tricks and whatnot. So it'll be fun to actually go skating when the time permits.
Yeah, well, that sounds like a blast. You wouldn't catch me out doing that. I'd probably injure myself pretty badly, but it sounds like fun.
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. But yeah, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was great chatting. I enjoyed the conversation, and good luck with the book. Again, it's Our Money Stories, and we'll make a link to that as well, and check it out.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay.